Coming up, the betting lines, the key matchups, and game predictions as the New York Football Giants travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, we are your host over here, Adam Armbrecht, covering the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast. My boy, Doug Norrie. And yonder there's the healthy, wealthy, and wise, the season generational ticket holder, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
I'm good. You're having a pretty good December. I was
Thank you.
just thinking about that, where, obviously the holidays are coming in, everyone's happy and festive, but you covering the Nets and also the Giants right now, like in New York, those are the two teams that, I mean, the Knicks are doing well, but those are the two teams that are as hot as can be. Kudos, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. And I like to think that it is directly correlated to me how those teams perform. And if you're wondering, what about when they weren't performing well? I can't speak to that. I'm unaware. But when it's going good, I feel like, listen, if there's a ring, championships, ring of honor, I don't want to go too far down the list. But bottom line is, it's been a lot more fun this year than it has in years past for a lot of franchises around New York, by the way.
As we get to the holiday season, before we jump into football specific stuff, what's your plan around the holidays? Obviously this weekend, things are going down. Are you looking forward to going somewhere, seeing family? Are you looking forward to a specific food that you get to have around this time? Like what jazzes you up around the holidays?
Yeah, we see people every single day. Starting today, by the way, we're recording on Friday morning, so we'll do some things with my partner's family, her sister and brother. They'll come over to our apartment potentially. We'll hang out a little bit. Christmas Eve is over at my mom's house, and then Christmas morning we do a little breakfast brunch thing. It's a whole smorgasbord. I'll tell you what, man. We do lasagna because we got a little bit of Italian in us, so we do a little bit of lasagna for Christmas. We also do a ham, so we get kind of that mix there. But I myself will be preparing two types of potato sides along with Brussels sprouts, a nice little Parmesan, butter, and rosemary sweet potato that you cook up in nice little tins in the oven there. So
That sounds delightful.
got some things going on. You picked up some sizable meats, I believe, recently.
Well, yes, I go to my parents' place every year for the last 30 something years, probably and beyond me. My parents have hosted Christmas Eve, and it is a Polish feast.
Yes.
So shout out all those lunch pail blue collar people, pierogies, golumpkis, kielbasa, the works. And they also do the spiral ham. It is, chef's kiss perfect. If anybody likes, who doesn't like a pierogi every now and then, and who doesn't like kielbasa? Like just perfect when it's nice and cold outside. I am really looking forward to that tomorrow.
It's fantastic, man. I don't care. I think I kind of basically spent the entire month of December saying it's like, hey, it's the holidays, baby. Let's ride. So it's been a lot of fun, man. And hopefully everyone out there, however you spend your holidays, traveling and otherwise, stay safe. A little bit of wacky weather certainly around our area, but enjoy it, right? Family and all of those good things.
Well, you said let it ride, right?
Yeah, let it
Was
ride.
that what Zach Wilson was doing for the Jets last night in the Thursday night football game? Was he letting it ride? Is he in the Russell Wilson camp where he's like, Zach Wilson, let's ride? And they're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this together, Russ.
I actually think I would love if after every single interview and post game press conference, Zach Wilson said, all right, we all good here? Great. Let's go Jets. Take flight. And then, and off he goes. Listen, we're just going to touch on it briefly because it was the Thursday night game. It really matters for a hot team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team struggling like the Tennessee Titans. They are now nipping at their heels in the division. So a big game for them. And it was big for the Jets. Like they could have been clinging to playoff, hope there. Now it feels like that is all but a foregone missed opportunity for them. Man, I want to ask you this question because it looks like the New York Jets and every single player wants to play with and for anyone not named Zach Wilson at the QB position. You got that sample from the backup last night, but do you at all put it on the coaching staff, like for not being able to find a way to manufacture success, on top of which even starting Zach Wilson in this game with your playoff hopes on the line, it looks like the practice squad QB gave you a better chance to win this game?
It's a good question, and it's what's going around on Jets social media. We obviously keep close tabs on that being a New York podcast here. Adam, the simple answer is it worked with Joe Flacco for a little bit. It
Right.
certainly worked with Mike White. Chris Strevler comes in off the practice squad, off the scrap heap, and gets more yards in his one first possession than Zach Wilson did the entire game.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you're like, okay, everyone else that we put into the game seems to at least move the ball slightly. And then all of a sudden, when Zach Wilson's in, he is the one common denominator that is not making it work. So for me, I kind of look at it and say, everyone else has some level of success. The team obviously is 6-4 under Zach Wilson, but it feels like it's almost in spite of him. And that's why they had to put him out of his misery last night and bring in a backup that they just activated from the practice squad. Was fascinating. I put it all on Zach Wilson. Things got to change for him.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, they're 10th right now. They dropped their 7-8, 10th in the playoff picture. I mean, it's relatively tight. Obviously, if the Patriots were to lose, there's some scenarios. You look up at the Dolphins, et cetera. But it seems like it's all but over. It's really hard, man. You have that defense playing for your team right now. It's one of the best defenses in the league. And I get it because you want to keep seeing, kind of confirm or deny. But it looks like it's all but been confirmed. So you kind of waste this season. Maybe you still get your confirmation around Zach Wilson. But the hard part for me is, why even bother benching him then? Right? Because you already went down the road of putting him in this game. He already looks like garbage. I don't know. Anyway, we don't have to belabor it, but it is a funky one. And just back of your eyes there, friends, back of your minds, wherever you put that stuff. This offseason could be interesting because the Jets would be a prime team to be in on the Daniel Jones kind of conversation if he goes to the free agent market.
Connor Hughes, who covers the Giants and the Jets a little bit, he came out and he said, clearly it's not working with Zach Wilson. Look at these 3 or 4 names that are potentials. One was Lamar Jackson, which was a pipe dream. Jimmy Garoppolo was another one. And he mentioned Daniel Jones. And it's interesting to see Daniel Jones is a name. Other teams are like, hey, we're in the market for a quarterback. Let's just keep an eye on him. The flip side of the game last night, and I won't belabor the point, is the Jaguars are surging. The Jaguars are a competent football team. Trevor Lawrence looks like a real NFL legit quarterback under a good offensive mind like Doug Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about how the wins and the losses for the Giants at the end of the season either look good or look bad. That Jaguars win on the road starts to look much better as the season progresses when you see the Jaguars are surging, probably going to make the playoffs, just beat the Cowboys and the Jets and the Ravens and the Titans. That's a pretty good list of teams that the Jaguars are piling up.
Well, by the way, though, the Titans win doesn't look so good anymore for the Giants, though, as they continue to flounder, right? So I'll give you one or the other. Either we measure them, at the time when we played them and what we saw from those teams, or we take it in totality, at which point you say the Titans are a terrible team because they don't have any success offensively, et cetera, et cetera. But it's good for the Jaguars. I like seeing teams like this. I said it about the Lions, right? You don't want it to come at the cost of the Giants making the playoffs, but a team like that, like I think some franchises, it's not like, what did the Jaguars fan base ever do to deserve this, right? Just being a total dumpster fire for so many years. It looks like you saved your rookie, your second-year quarterback, the high draft pick that you kind of all of a sudden were having doubts about because you had a disaster of a coach last year. You bring in Doug Peterson. He has the pedigree. You get things back on track. So it's really good. And then, listen, we'll talk about it in the offseason. There are some parallels around trying to get QBs and teams back on track for the Giants and a lot of these other franchises around the league, specifically this season. That being the case, I have another question. Maybe I'll ask it at the end. But that being the case, the Minnesota Vikings are coming up for the Giants. We've set the table here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of good games, a lot of things to keep an eye on. But we talked about it a little bit yesterday. And when you go back in and look at this, I'm going to throw out, because I just think we mentioned so much about the high-powered offense that is the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's easy to sit here and go, well, obviously watch out for Dalvin Cook, right? 1,000-yard running back. And then obviously watch out for Justin Jefferson, who, by the way, has 1,600 yards right now, 7 touchdowns, 111 receptions with still 3 games to play in the season. So who knows where he'll end up in the all-time ranking single season record book. It's going to be pretty damn impressive. But it's like Adam Thielen, who's had some injuries and hasn't looked great, looks like he's starting to take a step back, still has 66 catches for almost 700 yards. And then go down even a layer deeper and notice that KJ Osborne has 45 catches on 73 targets for almost 500 yards. Like, I think even beyond the high-profile guys, which can be damning, it's actually also going to be some of the supplementals, because if you're going to bracket and have a safety looking over in double coverage on Justin Jefferson all the time, there's going to be other ways that you can get beat by this team. They're not just like a 1 or 2 trick pony. It's what makes them so dangerous.
Well, they asked the coaching staff that question. He said, "You know what's great? You throw a safety over the top, and Kirk Cousins is still going to throw it to Justin Jefferson because he's that good.
Right. And
He's literally
also,
that good. He can, like you saw it in some of the other games on fourth down. He's high pointing the ball against 3 defenders. He's that good. And the other issue, Adam, is because our secondary is so depleted. When you start talking about Adam Thielen and Osborne and other players that can get in the mix, they're going to be going up against practice, guys that are being elevated from the practice squad.
yeah.
Clearly, not only Justin Jefferson is a matchup nightmare for the Giants, but the secondary and tertiary ones that you just mentioned are going to be very difficult for the Giants to stop.
And by the way, I don't even want to poo-poo this a little bit here because you gloss over talking about Hawkinson, the tight end who they got from the Detroit Lions, and his numbers aren't. You look inside of him, all of a sudden you go, oh right, 9 catches, 7 catches, 5 catches, 5 catches, 4 catches, 6 catches. That's what he's been doing since coming over to Minnesota. So some of his numbers, when you look at the total for his season, and you say out of the tight end position, he's giving you 39 on 57. Yeah, that's with the Minnesota fight. Like it's over this very tight window. Big player too. Like Thielen has size. Hawkinson has size. Jefferson is just an electric player. It doesn't matter. Dalvin Cook has 33 catches this season for 265. And by the way, those top 3 receivers, Jefferson, Thielen, and Osborne, all average 10 plus yards per reception. So when they're catching the ball, they're at, and I know there's the big splash plays, but they're averaging first downs when they bring the ball in. Like that is a problem for this team. And oh, by the way, 754 touchdowns for those 3 players respectively. So like, yes, they do have these top level guys, but also in crunch time. So even when you get to the red zone and you mentioned, hey, even with the depleted secondary, we can shrink the field, we can congest things. Great. There's no guarantee that he's just going to go to Jefferson. He's shown capable and willingness to go to some of those second and third options. Like, and that matters when you're the Giants and trying to say, what do we want to take away here? It's a very pick your poison kind of weekend for Big Blue.
It is, and it's difficult. You have such an established run game with Dalvin Cook. You have number 1 wide receivers and number 1 running backs, all of the number 1 type tight ends in Hawkinson. It is a very difficult matchup for the Giants, which is why guys like Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau are going to be just even more important because they need to wreak havoc, muck the game up, and create turnovers. And that's the way that the defense can get off the field because outside of that, Kirk Cousins is playing great football. It's probably the area that we can expose. One little tidbit too is the starting center for the Minnesota Vikings is out for this game. That gives Dexter Lawrence up the middle a big opportunity to take care of a backup and get pressure on the interior. So when you think about it, it's all going to be how much pressure can Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence get, and how much can Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau wreck the game and change the game script for Minnesota.
Yeah, and I'll even point out too, and I mean, you can say we're painting a very a depressing picture here, but one of the areas because the Giants do not have a strong linebacking core as we've highlighted, and I mean the eye test tells you that as well. And you mentioned, okay, no center. So it's like if I think about it, yes, like I know that we want to see Kayvon Thibodeau and we want to see Azeez Ojulari getting into the backfield, getting pressure on Kirk Cousins. But I'll be optimistic that Leonard Williams, that Dexter Lawrence can maybe do some things up the middle. And then when I look at those guys, man, I hate to break it to you. You got to serve 2 masters in this game. You need to be pressuring Kirk Cousins, trying to get sacks, and you also need to be finding a way to be a significant contributor trying to shut down or contain Dalvin Cook, because you cannot just be, and we've seen this, and it's not a knock on any of it, happens to teams across the league. When you start trying to get pressure and you go up the field and you end up 5-6 yards into the backfield before you get around to get back to the quarterback, those lanes that get opened up off the edges, especially in a 3-4 defense like Wink is often set up in, all of a sudden those edge lanes become very easy for Dalvin Cook to hit. And we saw just 2 weeks ago, he was absolutely destroying, ripping, by the way, taking inside-outside runs and breaking into the house for a 55-yard touchdown. Like, it's brutal, man, but these are the kind of games that defensively in that front, you cannot take snaps off if you want to be able to have an opportunity. I don't mean taking a rest while on the field. I mean, legitimately, you won't be able to let these guys come off the field if you want to have success.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough decision for the Minnesota Vikings offensive coordinator. They need to decide, are they going to just establish the run with Dalvin Cook? Are they going to try to attack the Giants secondary, knowing that Adoree Jackson likely is out again and really don't have that much resistance in the secondary? Will be interesting to see on that side of the ball how they line up and whether Wink Martindale just says the only way that we can be effective is just all out blitzes and getting as much pressure as possible on Kirk Cousins and just hoping that doesn't burn you with Dalvin Cook. Like, I feel like that's probably the answer in this one, because it's tough. Like you said, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. Like, you got to stop the run and the pass. Real tall order for a defense that's missing some key contributors.
Yeah, and it's funny too because a little side note about this as we'll get into what our predictions. Andy's bet of the week here in a moment. It is funny too when you look at the snap counts. And even though Daniel Jones missed some time, obviously over the course of this season, you go back to week 9. That's their bye week there. Sorry, week 4, I meant 82% of the snaps, right? He comes out in that one. Week 14, 81% of the snaps. So there's some things missing in here, but point being, offensive snaps for Kirk Cousins, 954. Daniel Jones at 916. If he had played all the games, it's basically even. And it's just one of those things where you think about, oh, Minnesota can be so explosive and they can be so dynamic and they can hit home runs. They can. And also, they're going to give you offensive possessions where they have 6, 7, 8 play drives that maybe are a punt, maybe are a field goal attempt, right? So even though they can hit the home runs, it's not the kind of thing where they're boom or bust and they go out there, right? And then the defense gets out and they're getting dragged. Even though their defense is susceptible, and I think that's what we'll talk about here briefly, it's also just the idea that, like, this offense can play consistent and just kind of be on the field beating you up. And I think that's actually dangerous for the Giants defense of saying, we're not going to go with the big plays, but we will sit here and give you 8 and 11 and 6 and 12. And all of a sudden you're 2 or 3 drives into this game where you've been on the field for a significant amount of time.
Well, the offense certainly gets plenty of opportunities for the Vikings because their defense is terrible.
Yes.
They get scored upon all over the place. And this is a real opportunity for the Giants offense to make some hay and really look like a competent offense that can get the ball going. Remember, we talked about this before. Knowing that the Minnesota Vikings like to get all those possessions on the offensive side, time of possession and sustained drives for the Giants is going to be critical in this game. I cannot stress enough how much just having Jones methodically work with Saquon Barkley and keep the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands is going to be the way that I think the Giants have the best chance for victory. It's going to be tough. Their secondary is not very good. We talked about it. They're 31st in the league in almost all defensive passing statistical categories. They cannot stop the pass to save their lives. And that has been really their Achilles heel all season. How do you think, we'll touch on this briefly and then we'll get into the odds, but how do you see Mike Kafka and the Giants offense scheming this up and attacking this terrible Vikings defense?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they give up 400 yards through the air per game, right? Like, as a defense, and they give up 120 yards on the ground. And you may think that, like, hey, that's a significant chunk, and it certainly is. And you'd like to think that Saquon Barkley can unlock that for more potentially here. But remember, there's still a dozen teams that are worse than them in the league. So they're kind of middle of the road when it comes to run defense. Now, the question becomes, you mentioned Mike Kafka. It's, do you go to the well with Saquon Barkley? And let's just go back and look at last week's game, which is a different defense, a far better defense, right? But you're talking about maybe struggling early in the run game to get it rolling. The offensive line is kind of it's a fluid process about how well they're going to play in both phases. So can you afford to spend the first quarter and a half trying to get Saquon going and sacrificing runs, and then maybe find yourself trailing, be forced to go to the pass, and then it does become different. Even the worst defense in the league, if they know that you are in a forced passing scenario for the second half of a game, it does make it a lot easier to kind of scheme their way to a little bit of success. I think they need to be balanced. Like, and you can go back to this last week where it looked like they finally got back to a little bit of that rhythm. Hey, we're going to take what they're giving us. They're going to run zone looks for Minnesota defensively. The underneath stuff should be there. There's been a couple of instances where, hey, if they congest the middle of the field, Daniel Jones needs to be smart. I won't be shocked if his legs are kind of a factor here, just saying, hey, looks like it's crowded, but guess what? When they go zone, it means I got 4 or 5 yards that I can pick up on the outside and get out of bounds, get down, and give ourselves a second and reasonable. So I honestly think it's about balance. And you can't point to that 97-yard drive and say, just do that. But I actually think it benefits them to say, hey, let's pick up 4 to 7 yards per play. They didn't throw anything over 15 last week. It's odd, man, but I actually think the game script from last week makes a lot of sense. Be balanced, take what's being given to you, and try to have a handful of 6 to 7 minute drives. That can really cut down the opportunities for Minnesota.
I couldn't agree more. I think the one point that you mentioned about Daniel Jones, I do see them probably rolling him out of the pocket, looking to take
Give
a
him
couple
options.
of deep
Give him
shots,
options.
right?
Yeah.
Like continue to roll him out, see what's available to him. And if he doesn't have it, he just tucks the ball and tries to get those 5 yards, those 7 yards. I could see a lot of that movement of Daniel Jones as part of this game script, to your point. When we think about the overall lines, which way do you want to go with this? You want to do over unders? You want to do Andy's bet of the week? You tell me, Adam.
Let's start with Andy's bet of the week.
Right. So, because
no, wait, hold on, Andy. Should we pause the episode? Do you need a minute? That wasn't the response was not brimming with confidence about diving in on this.
No, because I was going to talk about game script and what I think is going to happen and where the areas are going to go. But I will give you the finish line, the finished product of what I think is going to happen.
Lovely.
And that is, this feels like a game where the Giant fans are going to be like, oh, that's right. Daniel Bellinger was so good before he had that injury. The last couple of weeks, he's been kind of getting his feet back from underneath him. The Giants focused heavy on the Saquon Barkley run game last game. It feels like he's been a little bit of an afterthought in the offense after being so important on the first half of the season.
Sure.
And so for me, I think the Giants are going to be able to move the ball effectively against the Vikings. And I see an opportunity on one of these plays where Daniel Bellinger kind of slips out. I think this is a touchdown game for Daniel Bellinger. Give me Bellinger to score a touchdown at 3.5 to 1 on your money in this game. It feels like a really good bet, knowing that the Giants are going to want to get him involved. And usually his routes are 7 to 10 yards down the field, which is what Kafka has been doing for Daniel Jones. To me, this screams Daniel Bellinger for 45 yards and a touchdown in this game.
And sorry, let me just 399 total yards for the Vikings. I think I said that as passing yards. 278. Yeah, 278. So that was like that's a lot of passing yards, Adam. You want to just double check to what you're putting out there for people. And to your point, the Giants, by the way, like they only surrender 216 passing yards per game. I mentioned before, just to round that out, the rushing numbers where it was 120 for the Vikings. Remember, the third worst team against the run is the New York Football Giants. In some ways, maybe that actually benefits the Giants, where it's like, hey, keep running Dalvin Cook. Maybe that's a better game script for us if we allow you to pick up some of those chunk yards. So I like the Bellinger one, though. It does feel like as you get down into the red zone, do you have by any chance, I know I always love to put you on the spot with this stuff, Isaiah Hodgins, do we have an over-under on his yardage?
We do. So he is right around the same odds to score a touchdown as Daniel Bellinger is. They're both about 3.5 to 1. So I find that interesting that they have them kind of in the same spot. They have Isaiah Hodgins listed at 33.5 yards.
Yeah, I'm going to say take the over on Isaiah Hodgins here, not just because it's a bad passing defense for the Vikings, but again, you said about getting out to space. The one thing we've seen the last handful of weeks, almost essentially since he was picked up from Buffalo and inserted into this starting rotation for the wide receiver group, he knows the routes, right? He knows where he's supposed to be on the field. And oftentimes we've seen him working in the middle a little bit. His consistency in terms of bringing down those targets has really been there the last handful of games. It may only take 3 catches for him to get to that, but I think there is like a 12 to 15 yard down the middle of the field kind of route, especially if you run Slayton on a vertical, let Bellinger work in that 6 to 10 yard kind of range, and maybe have Barkley coming out of the backfield, right? So there's going to be some options there, I think. It depends on where they line them up, how Richie James is going to impact this one, running some of those slant combinations. But I would take the over on him. And listen, you know the way Adam likes to work. Maybe you do a little same game parlay and you make your choice. You want Bellinger touchdown and you want the over on Hodgins' yardage in the game. That's how you a little bit of extra cheddar.
I mean, judging by that, Adam, it sounds like you're getting bullish on this game. I'm going to give you the spread. I'm going to give you the over under. Why don't you give me your prediction first? So that as of right now, the Giants are a 3.5 point underdog on the road to Minnesota.
Love it.
It is an odd line considering they were bigger underdogs in Washington than they are in Minnesota. And the over under in terms of total points is 47.5. So hit the listeners with what you think is going to happen and what your prediction is for the game.
47.5. That is a tight one. I would take the over in this one because I like the idea of maybe being in a 26, 23, 27, 21 kind of game. So you're going to be right in the range to kind of peak it. Honestly, man, I highlighted this earlier in the week. I said, technically speaking, the Giants are not out of the 5th seed scenario here with those stumbling, bumbling, buffooning Dallas Cowboys. I just think that game over the Commanders was really important. I know that this team is going to get beat up in the secondary. I know there's going to be big plays for the playmakers for Minnesota. but they're a really bad defense. This might be the first time that we go back a few weeks when the first matchup with the Commanders, where Daniel Jones ran for 70 plus yards, threw for 210, 220 yards, right? If you can get that kind of game going for him early, again, balanced offense, and get Saquon some chunk plays there early as well, I really think that this game, it's going to kind of be like a slow paced shootout. It's not going to be one where it's, 17-20 at halftime, but by the end of it, it's going to be two teams in the 20s. And I honestly think that defensive front, that big miss there for the center position for the Minnesota Vikings, the lack of mobility for Kirk Cousins, his ability to throw really soft, lazy passes downfield sometimes because he doesn't have a cannon for an arm. I'm taking the New York Football Giants in this game. Like, I think that they get this win and we start to build a little bit of that wild card momentum for ourselves after having a lot of losses. So give me the New York Football Giants. Give me them on the road. Give me 27-24 New York Football Giants.
Adam, I understand the game script. I understand exactly what you're saying. One thing to keep in mind about this right before I say anything is, obviously the Minnesota has a very potent offense. They put up 39 points against the Colts.
Right? I may be lowballing. Yeah, maybe I should be going 31-27 or something.
They put up 39 against the Colts. They put up 27 against the Jets. They put up 33 against the Bills. Like, they've been able to score some points consistently against decent teams. However,
here we go.
The teams that have defensive fronts and have the ability to get pressure are teams that they struggle against. Look at the Dallas Cowboys. They got boat raced in that game and lost 40-3. Could not get anything going because Micah Parsons was a game wrecker, and they just had no answer for the pressure that Dallas was able to get. They beat the Washington Commanders about 4 or 5 games ago, but they only put up 20 points, and that's because that interior defensive line of the Commanders is so good at getting pressure and stopping them. So when you look at it, it's like, yeah, you could put up 39 points against the Colts. What are they playing for? This Giant defense, even hurt, is going to play better. I think the only way the Giants win this game is if it is under 47.5 points scored. If it gets into a shootout, that is the last thing the Giants want to have happen in this game. I think we've shown the ability to muck it up, get a little bit down and dirty, and then see where the chips fall like they just did against the Commanders. I, too, think the Giants are going to win this game. I can't believe I'm even saying it, but I think that they're going to win this game outright.
That's right.
I think their best chance to win is to keep this game under. And so for me, give me the Giants 24, the Vikings 20. First team to 23 wins this game.
Wow, that's a bold one. That's a bold one, calling for that few of points against the Minnesota Vikings. I will say inside of that too, because I think when you and I talk about like game scripts, it's like I think we're usually like 80% in agreement, but sometimes it's like, how do you get there? The last 20% is the bit of the mix. I won't be shocked either. I'm actually just clicking through a couple of these box scores for the Minnesota Vikings and noting like there's been games when they have dominated time of possession as well. So again, you got to kind of throw that out the window a little bit. I do think it is kind of critical who starts with the ball. If it's Minnesota, does the Giants defense just hold up? Even a field goal is a victory on an opening drive. If the Giants get it, sustained drive, touchdown. Like, we talk about the Giants all season long and the razor thin margins that they operate within. It does come down to all of these little instances. And don't forget, against Washington, one thing that did rear its ugly head again for the New York Giants, and not just the penalties, which they've been having an issue with of late, it was also special teams play, right? That last drive could have gone a lot differently and was a lot easier for the Commanders to be in a possession maybe to win because they got a big return to start that off, right? So when you start near midfield, especially then if you're the Vikings, I'll take Kirk Cousins over Taylor Heineke most days, right? Like, you can get into real dangerous territory if you start giving up short field. So smart plays, strong touchback kickoffs for Gano, really good punting from the Scottish Hammer. Like, all three phases got to be involved in this one if they want to have a chance to get it done. But I think at the end of the day, Andy.
At the end of the day, I think the biggest difference is having Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau on the field at the same time. It just feels like that pass rush changes games. It obviously didn't against the Eagles. They just kind of got out in front of us and the game got away from us. But I do think that them being out there is the biggest reason why the Giants are going to have success and maybe eliminate some of the big plays that Kirk Cousins wants to get. We both feel the same way. We both feel like the Giants are going to win. There's more than one way to do it. Obviously, you think it's going to be a little bit of a higher scoring affair. I think they got to hold them. But how nice would it be? Pour yourself a drink. Get
That's it.
excited over the holiday weekend. Tuck yourself into a nice 1:00 Saturday game, and then you wake up the next day, if you do celebrate Christmas, with another present under the tree, and that's the Giants potentially going to the playoffs.
Landon Collins, another key game for him, I think, helping and defending against Dalvin Cook here as well. You better believe it. By the way, friends, get us over on YouTube where we continue to build our audience. We get the spectrum of people that are loving what we're doing and are disgusted by it. Come in for the conversation. We appreciate it from all sides. The podcast feed as well. And I do make some signature cocktails over the holiday season, expanding my repertoire, Andy, not just from a vanilla bean White Russian, but also a cinnamon Russian on the table this weekend. So everybody enjoy it. Be safe out there. Obviously, wherever you're going, wherever you're traveling, have a great, happy, healthy holiday. And we will be back in, hopefully, following a big blue victory as they continue to surge towards that playoff picture. Oh, and by the way,
oh, you want to steal my thunder? Is that what you're doing here? Is that how we
I was
end?
just done.
Is that
I was
how
just
we're
done with the
bringing in-
episode. I was all set. I thought, great job, everybody. But
You're like, wow, we did it, everybody.
Yeah.
Good job.
Woo. But as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, even against his own host, demand the people know.
Happy holidays. Let's go Big Blue.